Hey guys, welcome again. Can you hear me? Can I talk? Yes, very good. Now I'm gonna continue with the content that I was doing. Maybe just maximizing this share view a bit more. Oops. So if you ask any questions, I can see it from there. So there are different terminologies we are using under the umbrella of agile development. One of them is called extreme programming, which is you're gonna see in this course quite often, and also in many different software developer positions or companies. They are using extreme programming extensively, and the most popular one is probably going to be Scrum is definitely at the top of the agile method practices that you will come across. Up until like a couple of years ago, I was seeing Scrum like everywhere. Every single job advertisement that I saw on the internet, Indeed, LinkedIn, other websites, like Scrum was like, I would say maybe 90% of the software developer positions, they were using it back then. Now I don't check the job offers that much anymore, but I still go on LinkedIn and look for developer positions. Not that I want to be a developer myself. I did that already, but I'm looking like what is being used in the industry, and they still use Scrum quite a lot. They are still using it very much, very often. It's less compared to the because as time passed, new development methodologies, new management strategies develop. Scrum is still popular, still being used though, and you will come across it quite often. And there are some other less used practices, but still they are there, such as Crystal, adaptive software development, again, another popular one. DSDM is a popular, widely used, a global industry agile development techniques. And there are, of course, more. I can't name them, all of them in here. That's not the focus of the course. So you can look up those agile development methods. You can find even more, but these are at the top of the list that I come across. Okay, especially Scrum and extreme programming. You need to get to know what they are, because majority of the companies are still following these development techniques. And it's not only a development technique; it's also a management way, how people, companies manage the development. So I'm going to go down, and this is now the trend that is going on in the agile methodologies. Like you will see Scrum a lot, extreme programming once again. Usually extreme programming is combined with Scrum nowadays. The SDM is especially used in global businesses, feature-driven development, adaptive software development. These are all examples. You will come across with extreme programming quite a lot. And what is extreme programming? So you see some pictures here, like doing extreme sports and programming at the same time. Like, what is it? Let's go and take a look. Extreme programming is an agile development method. Now I want to underline development 5 times. It's not a management, but it's a development method. And that is based on delivering several versions of a software and supporting it through incremental development as frequent releases. In XP, usually we call it XP, developers work in pairs and develop tests for each task before writing the code. All tests must be successfully executed when the code is integrated. Then you have 3 to 4 weeks gap in between to release the software. Now, extreme programming is a development technique that also practices pair programming, which means that you program in pairs rather than doing it all alone by yourself. So it's like every person takes up every role in the company, and these iterate constantly. So assuming that your company has three important roles for the development. One of them is the developer, the programmer, software engineer. The other one is the tester. And finally, another person does the user analysis and quality assurance. So when the software goes to the user base, they look at the feedback and they come back. So how does this work? Because the way that extreme programming practices pair programming, every single person in the company works with every other person. And they constantly change their roles as the iteration goes. So in this cycle, you might be the developer developing the code with a pair programming technique where someone sits next to you and points out. And once that phase is done, in the next cycle, you can take up the same role or change it. This time you go to the testing side, and instead of writing the code, now you test the software. And in the next cycle, you can be the quality assurance person, getting the user feedback and making sure the developers are meeting with those quality assurance standards. So you don't have one specific role here, you have more than one, and you can change it constantly with each cycle once your job is done, because you're basically working on a schedule base for 3 to 4 weeks gap. You can change your role within that cycle. It is possible. And more importantly, because you work in pairs, eventually you work with everyone else in the company, so you are involved in every single step for the development. It could be the development stage for the specific model in your coding. It could be the testing. It could be getting front of your user base, what they want, how this is going to deliver in the user stories. Because basically you treat your software as your child. It is something that you own and you're going to develop, and you know every single step. This is something very difficult to apply in a plan-driven environment, because in plan-driven environments you have very specific roles and you stick to that role until to the time that you can get a promotion or you can lose your job, or it goes to somewhere else. But technically your role in a plan-driven environment is defined very well. In an extreme programming environment, these are more versatile. You can change your role and you work with every other person, because there is no specific hierarchy here. You kind of like in the same position with other people, so you work with them within that environment. So how does the extreme programming lifecycle work? So basically, the user feedback is defined as user stories. Then these stories, which is basically the user experience, is divided into tasks. And from there, you generate a logbook. And from the logbook, you pick up the requirements, let's say 10 to 15. If you have 100 requirements, you don't take up the 100 to deliver in the next version. You just focus on a focus group. It could be 10, it could be 15, it could be 20, whatsoever, depending on how hard it is. Once this is done, you integrate the software. So while you do develop the software, you also do the white box testing. Eventually, after going through the 3 or 4 weeks time, the software is released to the platform and evaluated by the customer once again. So you don't have an explicit testing phase here, as you can see. You just do the testing during the development, and there is no explicit testing afterwards. You release the version, and then the user stories takes place. So you kind of like have only the alpha version and not anything else. Okay, so you don't have a beta version where the potential users take this, but rather once the software is released, you rely on the user stories. So what do we know about incremental extreme programming? Sorry. Incremental development here is a practice we can use in extreme programming, which is very well aligned in how it works because you're going to deliver the software in smaller versions anyway. You're going to deliver with a frequent release this time though, and you're going to limit and stick to that release time. Let's say 3 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever you come across with. Requirements are based on customer stories and scenarios, something we already mentioned. Customer involvement is vital. Just again, in every single agile development, customer involvement is something that you do not disregard because those are the people actually testing your software. And once again, we need to emphasize the importance of people, not processes, because the people are technically involved in every single step. They need to have to understand every one of these steps, and you need to make sure that they are encouraged to work with one another. In practice, using XP is not as simple as it sounds, hence only those companies that adopted agile method pick and choose XP or some aspects of it that fit in their way. It might sound very simple on the paper. It might, seem to be manageable. But as the companies grow and grow, and that's how they earn their profit, it becomes more difficult to manage practices like XP because this is generally designed for a small to medium size team that can work with one another. And as the company obviously earns money, it goes bigger and bigger. Hence, more people work in it with bigger projects, and it becomes more and more difficult to sustain the XP principle. So it is easier for smaller industries to adopt this, and once they adopt it, at some point they are mostly forced to kind of like change their ways or only adopt certain aspects of it because it's not very suitable for big industries. XP is also often used with management focused agile methods such as Scrum. Now, the big difference between XP is and Scrum is basically management focused. It is a way to manage the software development, where XP is a way to practice the development of the software itself. Okay, please do understand the difference. Scrum is more focused on the management. XP is more focused on the development of the software. Now, do you have any questions? Nothing. They are very quiet today. Everything is clear? Can you even hear me, guys? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Good. You are extremely quiet today, so I don't know what to do sometimes. I don't see you at all, so I'm not following you on the camera. I'm not quite sure how to, even if you can follow me or not. So let's continue. Key components of extreme programming. There are four important components that come together and form XP, such as user stories, refactoring, test-driven development. This is a very important one, and pair programming. All these four components, when they come together, they form a good practice of XP. Okay, these are the most important parts of forming the XP. I wouldn't say they are the only parts, but I would say that they are the most important ones that should exist in an XP practice. So let's start with user stories. User stories are scenarios of what customer experience or might have experienced already. They work, the customers obviously provide their feedback based on what they experience with the software, such as I pressed this button and it crashed, or when I was talking to my friend and I was trying to send a picture, something else happened. All these stories come together, and people in the company, they analyze them, they try to understand what is wrong based on the scenario. They probably do the same thing as the customer did and observe when this happens and try to fix the bugs. It takes a lot of time sometimes to discover the user scenarios, and probably they will only go in an extensive, back facing fixing phase when they are reported from multiple customers. So just because only one guy mentioned something is not maybe serious enough to take it up full, but when there are tens of customers or users complaining about the same issue, then the company will take it to their priority on their list and address it in the next version. So these user stories generate storyboards basically, and forms up the basis of requirements. So now there's no specific requirement stage for non-functional, functional requirements. You just take up the story, you look into the story itself, and address the bug. So whenever you do a demonstration to me, I tell you, for example, go here, try to type a character, try to type start, press enter. And then if your program crashes, that's actually a user story. Okay, this is how the user stories are generated. Refactoring is a very good practice that works with pair programming. What it does is that it suggests the code being developed should be constantly refactored. It means that the code should be viewed by multiple people and be optimized as much as it can for that specific platform. So when you use this with XP, it works actually very perfectly, because all those lines written by people are being viewed by multiple people, or maybe all of them from the company, and hence everyone contributes their part and enhances the code, makes it as optimized as possible. Such as duplications can be reduced in the code if you could do something with a loop instead of repeating the same lines of statements, or if a class does a specific operation in less lines than being written there. All these things are under the umbrella of optimization. Okay, so you kind of like try to make the code less by typing less and doing more. That is the focus of the factoring. And it's a good practice to make your code being viewed by multiple developers at a time, so that everyone can contribute, suggest, and make the code as optimized as possible. Now, test-driven development is an interesting one. You will come across this with job offers that are offering you to work in an agile development environment, because this is basically what they use. In a test-driven environment, XP's probably is the most important property. It suggests that instead of writing the code, then writing the test for that code, do the opposite. Write the test before you even check up the code. So you come up with test scenarios even before you write the code to do it. And during the coding phase, you basically try to develop the code based on these test scenarios. It is something like I am giving you a series of questions at the beginning of the course. You go and search the answer of those questions, and then you come to listen to me. That will make the session probably much more efficient. And the same kind of practice is being applied. I actually do that, but I didn't enable it, I think, in the course page. So just to, let's see. Just that I remembered this, we have case questions at the beginning of the study questions here. We're gonna enable these. So if you actually look at the chapter questions before you come to my class, look at the answer of these questions, such as what are the shared characteristics of agile software development? What type of software are agile approaches particularly like to be successful? Name 3 fundamental features of extreme programming. Explain briefly. If you actually do a research to answer these questions and then join to my class to listen to me, it is probably going to be much more efficient for you. And that is actually a test-driven development. What you do here is that you generate a series of questions or conditions that you want to satisfy in the software first before you even develop the software. Okay, that is the core idea behind test-driven development. This means that what is going to be tested will be predefined and could be tested as soon as you write the code. Why does this work? Because you don't spend extra time or extra effort to create another test phase after the code is written down, because you already defined it. And test-driven development usually works quite well with the requirements phase, because when you define your requirements, you can also define your test scenarios. And that is a very, very good approach. You will come across with test-driven development quite a lot. In fact, I actually made a research just before I clicked on the. Now I'm going to close this. Just before I joined the classroom on agile developer positions or software developer positions, and I saw on LinkedIn, for example, that those jobs that are listed under the umbrella of software engineering, you will come across with a list of what they expect from you. Like, look at this position that I found. For example, it says that you need to know pair programming, agile methodologies, core Java skills, Java engineering, programming, design, business. These are the keywords that you will come across. It's not like something that you will only see, only programming or engineering, but other aspects are also involved. And it's a mid-senior level. It's not even a beginner position. And look what they expect. They expect from you to have core Java experience, Agile and Scrum methodologies, TDT, which is test-driven development practices, experience of XP and pair programming. So whenever you apply to a position on a senior Java developer, or even a mid-level developer, you will come across these things. I was just looking at the job offers, as I told you before, and even with junior positions, you can see that on LinkedIn or other platforms that agile development is very popular, and you are expected to know about test-driven development. So here is an example of how test-driven development works. So a number in MG representing a single dose of drug, a number representing the number of single dose per day. So the test scenario is test for input where the single dose is correct. Test for input where the single dose is too high or too low. Test for input where the single dose frequency is too high or too low. Test input where single dose is permitted range. So what you do is that you basically put the input there, whatever input you are, that could be entered, obviously. You generate a test scenario, which kind of phases you're gonna say test. For example, if you ask the age of a user, they can enter a number, they can enter characters, they can enter special characters. And then you write down what you're gonna test in that specific scenario, and then you generate an output. If it is okay, or an error message is being triggered to say that this is in the range or it's not. So that is a very basic example of how test scenarios work. What about XP? Now, before I go to pair programming in XP, do you have any questions? I'm following the Zoom chat group. Anyone that has any questions? No one. Very clear. Okay, very good. I'm just going to put it on the side then, since no one is going to ask any questions. Gonna move into the pair programming. Pair programming is a practice often used with XP. You will come across in the advertisements for jobs that pair programming is something you will see with XP together. Okay, and they work quite well actually. The reason is that the core ideas to reach the XP is very well can be completed with pair programming. In here, the practice is that the software developers do not work alone. So one of the guys sit next to the other and points out the errors or the possibly syntax or semantic errors that could happen during the development phase. They sit together at the same station to develop the software. However, some pairs do not always program together. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. The idea here is to create a dynamic environment that all team members work with one another. And that works very well with XP. There are a variety of reasons why we use pair programming. Because let's face the truth, in programming, when everything works, you feel like a god, and when nothing works, you are completely lost. There's almost no gray line in here. It's like, and sometimes things work and you don't even know why, and sometimes things doesn't, and again, you don't even know why. And just because you are an experienced programmer doesn't mean that you know everything. Okay, I have been corrected by some students in my classes, like when I forgot a semicolon, or when I made a logical mistake, or when I skipped some crucial step in my classes. Like last term, for example, I was teaching mobile programming, and in the course I forgot to modify the manifest folder to enable the internet connection, and I was trying to connect to a JSON file on the internet, and I spent like 30 minutes, maybe not less than 30 minutes, 20 minutes in the course trying to understand why I cannot read the JSON file. And one of my students at the back said that, Hojam, did you enable the internet connection? And I was like, oh, I didn't. And then immediately when I modified that configuration to enable the internet connection, everything worked. So it's like you can be corrected with other people, and that's absolutely fine. It doesn't mean that I'm a super knowledgeable, super experienced guy. You need to be more open-minded. You need to understand that you can make mistakes. And that is the core idea behind pair programming. You can be corrected by others just because you are paired with, assume that you work in a company for 10 years and you are paired with a first like new graduate person, doesn't mean that he knows much less than you. It could be like, because of your experience, it could be like you could skip a very basic step, and for that basic step could be very important for a junior level person. So he pays or she pays extra attention, and it could be very helping. Okay, it's like saying two hand is stronger than one, and it could help a lot. However, many companies, unfortunately, those that do not apply extreme programming, see pair programming as a waste of time. They don't want to pay money to those people who do not explicitly do coding. And they don't want to just sit there and gossip in front of a terminal machine. And they don't see it as a good practice. Okay. This is solely because of how business work, and they just don't want to pay extra money because software development is already very expensive field. So how does this work? Basically, people work in pairs, and then what they do is that they work in a specific part of the program, and every once in a while, with every cycle, those roles can change. With one pair, they can move together with the other part of the project, assuming that you only work with the user interface. Then in the next part, you work in the database. In the next part, you work with the modeling. In the next part, with something else, and so forth. You can be paired with other people during this time. So you are expected to change your partner with each iteration, so you can eventually work everyone else in the company. This creates a dynamic environment because everyone knows everyone, everyone worked with every other person, and basically the code that you worked on is being seen by everyone in the company as well. So they are kind of like developing in an open environment where the code is enhanced constantly. It has some disadvantages and it has some advantages as well. In order to pair programming to work, you need to have no ego. If you're gonna say something like, "Oh, I'm a teacher, I'm a lecturer, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a senior, I'm not gonna be corrected by junior level people and stuff like that," that's not gonna help you in any way. It's not gonna benefit the company. You need to understand that, or those people need to understand it's just that everyone owns the company now. It's a product that you develop together and you are a team. It's not about who is the best, who has a higher status, who gets paid more, but it's more about working together to achieve a certain outcome. In this kind of system, each line is obviously looked at by at least two people, so it has a very informal structure to work. And finally, the code, there could be multiple ideas generated from the team, and this could be implemented into the software itself. So the more ideas you have, it could be a double sided blade. It is both good and bad because the more open you are, the more approaches you would see, but it will be longer to implement it as well, which is actually mentioned in the uh, these disadvantages of this kind of method usually. So I am approaching to the next phase. Next 40 minutes is almost down. Before I go further, did you understand how extreme programming works? Have you had any experience in this regard? Either pair programming, extreme programming. Have you heard these terminologies before? Not at all. Okay. It's nice that you are hearing them then. I'm going to go into Agile project management, which is the most popular Agile project management method that again you will come across with the job advertisements in Scrum, sorry, in Agile development. Like like I said, I was looking for in the Java positions, and new agile development pod within this space are aid to design and development of new systems. This is an actual job advertisement that I saw. And what they focus on with the agile development umbrella is pair programming, test-driven development, and extreme programming. And they want to use Kanban, which is another management method you will come across quite often, and Scrum. So these are the Scrum methodologies are probably the most important ones that you will come in management, which I'm going to do in a minute. And I want to accept questions before I end up my session. Adeyemi Emmanuel has a question. I'm going to lower your hand. You can talk now.
Okay, sir. Sir, this Agile and Scrum, like, is it compulsory that you must know about these things before you can get work?
Yes, it is. It
Because
is more than knowing, actually, you need to have an experience about them. And this is why I plan to give you projects to practice this kind of approach yourself. Like,
Okay.
of course, the companies, if you are a junior position, which is like what you're going to be in a year or less than a year, hopefully, with all this corona mess when it ends, you will hopefully get your diplomas and go to your work. But most junior positions would not be expected to have a huge experience, but you will still be expected to know what you're gonna face. Okay, if you apply
Okay,
to a
sir.
job like that, the one that I showed you, that you have no experience in Scrum, you don't even know what it is, you don't even show your CV that you worked on it or you took something about it before, you did something about it. then it is highly unlikely that you're going to get a job. Remember that the big jobs out there in the metropolitan cities, the jobs that going to pay you well are applied by hundreds of people. And you need to make sure that you pass through a phase that your CV will be actually touched by human beings. So nowadays, when you apply to a job, let's say that I want to apply to that job that I showed you. This is most probably, if I send an application, it's not even going to be visible by a human being at first. It will go to a machine learning algorithm, and it will scan up some keywords, whether or not I am eligible to be interviewed, such as it will look for specific keywords in it, like Scrum, like XP, like Java developer, test-driven developer, whatsoever. And only you will be offered, or only your CV will be visible to a human being after you pass that AI algorithm. So if you do not even put on your CV those things like Scrum, like whatever they are looking there, your CV will not be actually be even seen by a human being, automatically eliminated by a machine algorithm. And you will just wonder, oh, why didn't turn me back? Of course they didn't, because they didn't even see it. Like, I know that in Google, only 1% of the CVs are seen by human beings. Can you imagine? And when you apply to Google, only 1% of the people, only 1 in 100 that they send their CV, only one of them will actually achieve to there, someone, a human being, to be seen. Everything else will be automatically eliminated by the machine learning algorithm. That is their procedure. So this is why it's very, very difficult to get into a company like that unless you have a contact from inside that can suggest you.
Okay, so I want to ask a question. I applied for a work before, and I was asked about Agile and Scrum, and they sent me some link that I should go and study this management.
Okay.
But what about project delivery?
You're gonna
Like
have an
product
assignment
delivery.
based on it. When I done this chapter, I'm gonna actually give you an assignment. So don't worry, you will have a vague idea at least about how this works, because I'm gonna give you an assignment. Okay.
Okay, sir.
I'm gonna end up this session now, and I'm gonna open up the next one. Please go to big blue button, and I'm gonna basically send you another invitation. So see you guys in a minute.